Hello, and welcome to the Screen Stoop podcast. This weekend, we saw Renfield. Your 3 favorite Nicolas Cage movies. Go.
Willy's Wonderland, Ghost Rider, and National Treasure.
In that order.
No, because then it's Willy's Wonderland, National Treasure, Ghost Rider.
Willy's Wonderland is above National Treasure.
Absolutely. He's so BA in that movie. He doesn't even say, he says like 2 words, but he's super BA, so.
Okay, mine are Gone in 60 Seconds. That's my favorite one. My favorite Nicolas Cage movie of all time. Angelina Jolie, Nicolas Cage, so good. The car, action, plan, heist. I love it.
It was the Fast and Furious before Fast and Furious.
The Fast and Furious wishes. And I know I really like Knowing as a kid. I really thought Knowing was out of this world, profound. And he's not the star. Aaron Taylor Johnson is the star of Kick-Ass, but Nicolas Cage steals Kick-Ass. I always picture him when his little daughter is running around and he's tied up to the chair and he's just screaming like her next move, release the something. And he's so into it. That's something you can say about Nicolas Cage. He is always into his role. He's committed to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I thought with Ghost Rider.
That would have been a perfect segue into saying that's what I thought with Dracula in Renfield, because that's the podcast that we're doing.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I don't even know if I care to put all of my thoughts together. What did you think about Renfield?
I didn't like it. I didn't like it very much at all. I thought Nicolas Cage did a good job acting. It was like we've talked about before, where it was basically a superhero movie. They relied heavily on all the action scenes.
So I don't know why Dracula or Renfield needed to be in this movie at all. I don't know why they needed to use their name or their character. They didn't use an accurate backstory. Bram Stoker's Dracula is such a good book. The best gothic horror. And Renfield is so different. I went into this movie knowing that it would not be like my favorite gothic novel. However, it was still so bothersome. I really tried. I consciously told myself several different times in the theater, just treat it like Robot Chicken, because I enjoy Star Wars. I enjoy superheroes, Batman, all of them. And Robot Chicken is able to mess with all of those characters in very poignant claymation form. And I think it's funny. I've laughed at it my whole life. So why couldn't I do that with this movie?
I think it's because they themselves didn't know what they wanted to do. It made it so originally when you start the movie, it makes it feel like it's gonna be about Renfield and him trying to separate from Dracula, right? Like it makes it sound like, oh, the whole movie is gonna be Renfield trying to get out from under Dracula and become his own person because he's been Dracula's servant for so long. And then somehow it turns into him trying to save the city from a crime lord family, and then next thing you know, he's trying to save that cop's sister, and it becomes less about him and more about all these other side characters.
He didn't need to be here. To tell this story, like you said, they went all these different directions. To tell this story, you did not need Dracula or Renfield here at all.
No, I feel like they could have done the movie with Renfield trying to get away from Dracula and not be accurate to the backstory. I would have been fine with that. The story that they went with, they didn't need Dracula or Renfield.
This is an episode of The Boys. This is way more like The Boys with superpowers and fighting. Like that would make more sense to me than vampires or even someone that possesses vampire-like powers. This character of Renfield is just the Beast. It's just the X-Men's the Beast. That they're not using Dracula powers.
Is that where he's from?
Yeah, he's the Beast in the new X-Men.
The whole time I was like, he looks really familiar.
Yes.
That's so stupid. But no, I agree. I felt like the main tone of the film was a social message about relationships that have codependency in them. And like, you need to tell yourself you're better than that and you don't need to be with a crappy person. So why not just make a drama movie with characters that aren't Dracula or Renfield? I feel like they did those names specifically to draw people in. Just
to draw people in. We have tactical combat skills. They were literally just saying, you turn into a superhero.
Yeah, I would agree.
But why did you use these characters if you didn't want to at least hold a little bit true to them?
Just to get people inside. Just to get people to watch the movie because it's Dracula. They do it all the time with big characters. They just put the character's name in there and it draws people in.
In the book, Renfield is first mentioned as an asylum inmate. A perplexing case. Renfield does eat flies, but the purpose is to capture life. I think it says word for word, absorb as many lives as possible. He's described as a zoophagus, like a carnivorous, an undeveloped homicidal maniac. He has pets. Renfield doesn't just eat bugs. He consumes life, and bugs in his asylum room is the easiest way to at first consume the life. But what he ends up doing, he uses the flies to lure in spiders, and then the spiders eat the flies. So now if he were to eat a spider, he's now consumed 2 lives. He then uses the spiders to lure in birds, and he uses the birds to eat the spiders. So now every bird that has eaten a spider is now multiplying that life force. And then he asks his doctor for a cat so that the cat can eat the birds. And then you assume he would have only had to eat 1 cat himself, but he has consumed all of that life. And then his doctor, kind of working through his Renfield's thought process, and he speculates on, well, what would he consider a man? Would he consider a man worth only 1 life, just as much as the fly, or would he consider the man worth more than 1 life? It's just a really interesting character and thought. When the doctor refuses to give him a cat, Renfield is found later sick and throwing up feathers, deduced that he has eaten the birds. He also does single-digit calculations to tally the life force of each animal. So he's trying to eat all these animals because he wants to become like Dracula. And so this movie, that's what I mean by like, it's just surface level. It's just like, oh yeah, Renfield ate some flies, so that's what he does, and that's how he gains all this power. That's not the point of Renfield. So
Yeah. Well, they obviously didn't base it off the book. It's just like any other character based off a book. Whenever they try to take an idea or a character from a book and put it to the screen, they always screw it up.
what's a really scary thing? Like Pennywise from It, or if Michael Myers was like a bumbling idiot and couldn't get anything done and didn't act like himself, wouldn't you be upset that that character like is not? Why did you use his name then? Just use someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I understand.
For what he was given, Nicolas Cage did his best. I think he's trying again. There was a period of time where it felt like he was phoning it in, maybe because he became a joke. He was like the Nickelback of actors. I don't know why I hated Renfield so much, but I really liked seeing Nicholas Hoult on screen. I thought he did well with the stupid story and character that they gave him. They missed the whole menacing thing, like completely.
Yeah, I mean, Dracula wasn't as menacing as he should have been either, but I think that just comes with either, like you said, they just don't know much about Dracula, or it was just the fact that they were trying to do a huge comedy thing with it, and you can't, maybe they feel like you can't do intimidating and comedy at the same time. When I mean, you can, but...
Renfield does call Dracula his master. Dracula does tempt Renfield with immortality, but Renfield is like homicidal and has a distinct purpose. He's not a lost puppy like it was portrayed here. The doctor is scared of him. Renfield in the book does have a good guy moment because he wants to protect the main girl character, Mina. So that was kind of shown, I guess. He does have like a split conscience because he wants what he wants, and then he also tries to kind of help the good guys. To punish Renfield for his betrayal, Dracula snaps Renfield's neck, and the vampire hunter and the good guys find Renfield dead.
There was some kind of a undertone with the relationship between Dracula and Renfield in the film. There wasn't just master and servant. I feel like there was something else, because like when Renfield had betrayed Dracula, they made Nicolas Cage seem like he was crying. So when Dracula was going on his monologue about how he was going to make Renfield suffer for his betrayal, there were tears in Dracula's eyes, as if he was like in love with him or loved him more than just a servant.
So I don't know. So Dracula is really scary because and that's when I actually thought that Nicolas Cage did a good job. So Dracula is scary because he's not a brute. He is loving. He captures people like Jonathan Harker, and he calls him my friend, and he speaks very kind and very almost lovingly and seductively. It's kind of why you fear him, is because he's able to manipulate and get close, because people almost allow him to get close. But he is a monster. He is very charming. He's very proper. He can speak all these different languages. He is attractive. He dresses really well. He also, it's assumed, kind of has like insight into people's minds, so he knows what you want to hear. It wasn't like a sexual thing, because it has been theorized that there's some sort of sexual undertones of Dracula's sexuality. The person that wrote the kind of summary of Bram Stoker, they said that he would be laughing at all of the interpretations that people have come up with of Dracula, because he just came up with the idea of Dracula after waking up from a nightmare. It wasn't like he was trying to insert all of these different messages into this book, but people have inferred them. This kind of seems like you were doing that type of assessment.
Well, the only reason why I thought that is because the message of the film is
a codependent relationship.
And then you have this codependent relationship between Renfield and Dracula, and Dracula's trying to get out, or Renfield's trying to get out from underneath Dracula, and Dracula is like hurt by it. And
So maybe the movie you're saying is wanting you. It's implying that.
I don't think, I've never read Dracula, but I don't think it's like that in the book or even like how the lore usually goes. But in the movie itself, because I'm focusing on the movie, is that that's what it seemed like, just based on the message of the movie itself, how Dracula reacts with Renfield's betrayal.
So Renfield in the books, picture Rumpelstiltskin from Once Upon a Time when Rumpelstiltskin is trapped in the cave and he is still aware of everything that's going on outside, but it's kind of extra scary because it's, how do you know all this? You've been locked up in the cage. That's what I picture Renfield when I'm reading Dracula.
Yeah, but in the movie as well, so what happens is Renfield tries to get away from Dracula, buys an apartment and tries to do his own life, right? Dracula finds out, he gets upset and is hurt by it. Then he realizes that he's trying to protect this girl who it seems Renfield likes, and so he goes after her for revenge. So it's like a jealousy thing. So when you put all three of those together, it sounds like a relationship that went sour and the ex got jealous and he's going after the new girl.
The codependent thing got lost in the we're going to go get him action, and also the, like, now Renfield and the cop have a relationship. Teddy, the Lobo son, trying to become a boss himself, and it is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a ton.
But all those were more interesting. So then the codependent thing, when it comes back in the end, I was like, oh, okay. I forgot that the codependent storyline was what we started with.
Yeah, even like the action scenes will take it. I don't know. It's hard to explain because it starts with the codependent thing and it turns into so much more, and then you have like the bulk of the movie is just about like trying to stop the Lobos and rescue that cop's sister who is an FBI agent. And then, like you said, it wraps it up with them defeating Dracula, and it goes back to the codependency thing. And it's like, where did this come from? I thought we had like gotten away from that. I completely forgot about it.
I know that it's like common vampire thing, the book written by Bram Stoker, Dracula. Sunlight doesn't like immediate turn them into flames. Sunlight, like Dracula walks around in the sunlight. Sunlight, I don't know how that became vampire lore that you can't go out in the sunlight, but it just means he's just weaker. He can't use his powers. Like, he can't be at full power in the sunlight, but it's not like, oh no, the sun.
This is what I was thinking about earlier, is that they obviously know about vampires because they've taken a lot of the lore. So you had him bursting into flames in the sun, which is a common lore thing. Like, that's in your show Vampire Diaries. They don't immediately burst in flames, but the sun hurts them, right?
And I'm fine if you want to do a generic one, but don't make Dracula, who doesn't burst into flames in the sun. Why are you doing it?
But then they also had, if remember when Dracula ended up in Renfield's apartment and he looks back and the mat says, "Welcome, come in," which is technically an invitation into his home. So that shows like the lore of like vampires can't enter your home unless you invite them in, but he had a mat that said, "Welcome, come in." So technically he invited Dracula into his home. That's why he says, "Oh crap." Mm-hmm. So it's obvious, and that lore I didn't know about until you started watching Vampire Diaries. But
that's what I mean by the superficial. So they got the superficial stuff down, but they didn't actually know about Dracula and Renfield. I don't care about generic vampire lore. If you have the name Renfield as the title of your movie and Dracula is your big bad villain, then why can't you at least...
My idea is that they probably did know because they did have these superficial things of Dracula, right? And they knew who Renfield was. So maybe it was just, it didn't fit with their comedic tone that they wanted to do. And so they just tried to do like, flames.
So I believe that this same movie could have been made without the name drop of Dracula and Renfield because it has so little to do with Bram Stoker's work. So just make a generic vampire thing, like that Office-style vampire comedy TV show, What We Do in the Shadows. And that doesn't piss me off because I'm like, okay, they're just doing a generic vampire thing. I like remember a scene where they're like, oh yeah, I'm hungry, let's go grab those people. And so he turns into a bat, grabs a human, and takes him up in the air, and you just see like blood just like drop down on the sidewalk. And that's really cool. That is vampire-y though. Ripping their arms off and slashing them to bit. Dracula as mist going into the bishop's mouth and exploding him so that his body pieces and meat become like shrapnel from a bomb. It ends up being essentially a superhero action comedy, though, with a parody vampire subplot. So you could have done a What We Do in the Shadows type thing, but it was almost like they didn't even care to make this a vampire movie because they wanted to more focus on the action and the superhero powers. Yeah. Whereas What We Do in the Shadows, it's very subtle. It's cool. That is not vampire-y.
Yeah, I feel like they should have done, I just looked it up, and because it made me think of when you said Singular Bat, one of the best vampire movies I've ever seen is the Disney movie where it says my mom's dating a vampire. Do you remember that? Have you ever seen that?
No, I liked The Little Vampire.
Oh, there's that one too. Yeah, those two movies are great, and they're Disney movies. So far, those are the best vampire movies. I'm hoping that the one that we saw where Dracula's on the ship, the preview that we saw before Renfield, I'm hoping that
Yes,
one.
okay, so that's what I was gonna say. There was a trailer for a movie. It is chapter 7, I think. The entire chapter is in Mina's diary, and it is like a newspaper clipping of the town news because there was this huge storm, and this ship had rolled in. And the ship, all they found, a dog jumped off the ship. I don't know if I'm just spoiling this movie, but you learn in the book that the dog jumped off the ship, and Dracula actually can turn into a large dog or a wolf. That's one of Dracula's powers. He can turn into a bat. He can also turn into a wolf. So a dog jumps off the ship. There's one man left, the captain, and he's tied to the wheel, the steering wheel of the ship with rosary beads. The next day, like a new newspaper clipping comes out, and it says that he was found with like diary entry, but very, very short. It says like July 17th. We just set sail and everything's okay and the crew's happy. And then like a few days later, some of the crew is starting to act a little bit weird. And anyway, the story of this ship basically being haunted and these crew members being picked off one by one and accusing each other of like the killer's a human, the killer is a demon, the killer's on board. Who is doing this? You can't trust anybody. The first mate is acting weird. It's so cool. And it's just this one chapter in Dracula. And they're making an entire movie about it. And that I'm really excited for.
Well, it sounds like we already did the review for it. So, no, I understand. I don't think you spoiled the movie because like
they said all that in the trailer. Okay, so let's get back to Renfield. Anything that usually gets people excited about vampires is not even present in this movie. The mystery, the stalk, the chase, the eroticism, the fascination, the beauty, and the horror. This story did not need to involve not only Dracula, but not even vampires to tell it.
Yeah, if you are looking for a serious vampire movie in any way whatsoever, I would not watch this. Honestly, I won't even watch it again. I wouldn't watch this movie at all. I like Nicolas Cage in general, even in the movies where he's not doing good.
This was a cop movie. Redemption for a cop, like justice, because it reminded me of Saw. How in Saw, not Saw, what's it called? Spiral. The new Saw remake. How Chris Rock is also like, you know, kind of on the outs of his entire precinct. There's a killer like within the police force. And so you never know who to trust within the police department. And Chris Rock's dad in Spiral was also a cop, and he was a good cop, but he got killed because he wouldn't follow the bad cop rules. And that's exactly what this felt like, but just with Awkwafina instead of Chris Rock.
Yeah, it was definitely like a poorly made buddy cop movie with a cop being immortal and the buddy being a superhero, basically. Not even the vampire, just a superhero.
But, you know, want to know what did that better? Oh my gosh, what was it called? It's written by Max Landis. Fantasy characters. And he's a police officer. It's Will Smith, isn't it, right?
Oh. Bright.
Oh, it's called Bright?
Bright.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's Will Smith and then his buddy is an orc, and it's like a huge...
And the orc has like elevated strength and everything.
Yeah, and nobody likes the orc because of his race being an orc. No one likes orcs.
Okay, what was done well? Come on, let's think of something that was done well. The makeup, the prosthetics and the makeup was done really well.
Yes.
So I loved the look of the lair, but the lair had almost like a throne, and then the back of his seat was all of these blood bags. And I thought, that's really cool looking. All these blood bags, and they're dripping down into a singular tap or something. They've got all these different tubes that drain from the blood bags, and it looks really picturesque and pretty. But there was still blood, like in the blood bags, and there was blood in the tubes there was a ton of red in them. Maybe they were like, oh, well, we need to make sure that they look like blood bags. But blood bags, if you were to empty them, they're going to be clear. And he was like, I'm like heads falling off because I'm so starved for blood. And then I'm looking behind him and I'm like, there's blood right there, guy.
Yeah, I don't understand that. I don't know how that... I think it was just for aesthetics at that point.
I know, but my favorite character here in this movie ends up being Teddy Lobo.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I thought I was going to hate him because I thought he was going to be this huge joke because he is that funny brother guy that's so annoying during Parks and Rec. He was one of the invested characters that had motivation. I ended up really, really liking him.
Yeah.
He made me laugh the most.
That is true. Yeah, he was the funniest in the movie. I don't actually think I have a favorite character in this movie. There was a lot of characters. Like, for me, Teddy Lobo was probably the best one, but I'm not going to say he was my favorite because I have no favorites. They were all kind of for me.
Also, I would have liked his mother, and I know she's a prominent actor. I thought that she did the villain thing very well, but you needed to give me some evidence that she was the most ruthless crime boss. They had that scene where they've got some sort of body hidden behind a curtain. You had no issue showing us Renfield ripping off people's bodies and faces and all of that stuff. Why couldn't you show me that lady getting her hands dirty or at least watching some sort of villainous carnage? And then and then have her like smile or something, because I didn't feel ruthless. The actress did a good job. I knew she was supposed to be ruthless, but the movie almost made a mistake of not setting up the story around her so that she could have an opportunity to act like that.
Well, yeah, she had the line saying that their family wasn't the biggest, wasn't the strongest, wasn't the richest. The reason why they had the power is because they were the most feared.
But I'm saying they didn't, because they didn't set up any credibility that they were feared.
Yeah, it didn't hit hard like I think they wanted it to, like you were saying. I didn't sense the power behind the mom at all, or behind the family.
I don't know why they had to have that curtain up when someone was getting tortured. They should have just had them have this really deep conversation right in front of somebody or right over somebody getting tortured. And that actually could have been turned into a combination funny and horrific moment, because it could have been like, wow, I can't believe that they're not even paying attention to this guy getting like, they could have shown a guy with every single piece of skin on his body just getting filleted, and and right under them, and they're standing behind the table where the guy's getting his skin like filleted off and his eyeballs getting cut into little pieces, and they could have been having the serious conversation right behind him, and neither of them even care. Or maybe be like, oh, come on, be quiet or something. And that could have showed you comedy and horror plus the fear.
Yeah, they could have done like a Punisher torture scene where like the family is torturing the guy with all the piercings, and they're slowly pulling his piercings out of his face. They're tearing his nails up slowly. That was a brutal torture scene. Instead, you just, like you said, you got a silhouette of a person behind a curtain and her being like, you need to get your hands dirty, while she's not getting her hands dirty. I think the only good scene I really enjoyed, which involves Lobo, is when he's on the stairs and he snorts up that centipede.
That was so good. No, that was the only line that I liked, when he tied in the whole like that it's familiar with him snorting it, and then he reveals that he now has been given the powers that Dracula gave Renfield.
The only sad thing is that they diminished that by immediately involving like 6 henchmen that all have the same power.
I know the henchmen have all of the same power, and that's how it got superhero-y, because it's exactly like Captain America, Winter Soldier. We're just using human bodies as a speed bump to get past. We're not actually caring about these people as human beings, even though they might be police officers. It's just, let's show off our superhero action scenes, but then you can't tell me that you care about life, and you can't tell me that you care that you've been killing all of these people when you had no problem just like knocking off people left and right.
Yeah, I also want to point out that at no point was Renfield actually in any danger. There's multiple times in the movies, like during the fight scenes, that they try to make it seem like intense and like, oh, he could die at any moment, you know? He's never actually in any real danger until he fights Dracula. That's the closest you see him to dying. It's the only time he's actually injured. All the other times, like when he fought the assassin, stabbed him in the gut.
That was the only action scene that I liked.
Well, and even then, it was like, you weren't like, oh, is he going to die? Because they kind of showed you like he's just pushing it back inside. And like, yeah, he's in pain, but he's not like in pain like, oh, I'm dying. He's just like, oh, that really hurt. The only time he's actually close to dying is when he fights Dracula at the end of the movie, which sucks. Like, what's the point of all these fight scenes if none of the characters at any point are actually in any real danger? You're just showing us these CGI cool arms getting tore off and beating them up with each other's arms and stuff. Like, it's just ridiculous at that point, which I guess I can understand because it's a comedy movie, but I didn't really find it entertaining or comedic at all.
I hate how the Lobos are bad, because they killed that girl's dad, the Awkwafina's dad. And so the Lobos are bad. However, Renfield has killed so many people. And then at the end of the movie, Awkwafina says, no, you deserve to go live a life. You don't need to get locked up. You're all right just because you're a good person. So why do we have rules for them and not rules for this guy? You can't tell me that a killer isn't a killer. It's just mixed messaging here is stupid. It's so annoying.
Yeah, I think...
And it's not just this movie. A lot of movies do that. It's like, well, everything bad you've done is wiped away because you have a good heart. But how does that negate what they've done that's bad? Because you also hate all of these other people because they've done the same exact thing. Just because it didn't happen to you, they did it to someone else, or you are holding a grudge because someone killed a person that you care about, but then you kill other people that probably someone just off camera that we didn't see cares about. But there's no consequences for you. It's kind of how I feel like with Superman, Man of Steel, how no one that wrote that or directed it understood Superman in any way whatsoever. And they just completely disregarded any collateral damage or any kind of forethought in, oh, let's just have Superman wreck this entire city. Well, wouldn't that make people, one, hate Superman, and two, make Superman a villain because he's just being completely careless with his powers?
Yeah, they led into that with Batman v Superman, but then they made Batman also do the same thing. They do that with Marvel too.
Marvel too.
Yeah, all these superheroes that don't kill, like, it's...
They at least tried to kind of tie it in with the Accords. where they were like, you guys have just caused a lot of destruction. Like, have what you've been doing actually helped us or hurt us? Because if we balanced out the ledger, would we have more life or less life today if you just would have done nothing?
Yeah, exactly. But it's also ridiculous because if you want to go with the true superhero route with superhero movies, they don't kill. Like, they do everything in their power to not kill. Like, they split up in teams. Like, the Flash's main responsibility in the Justice League is to super speed around the city and get people out of the
And
city.
I don't care if you have a character that says, you know what, to do good, some people have to die. You know, for the greater good, a few people are going to have to suffer. That's just the consequences of life. I'm sorry. It's not fair. Life isn't fair. You can have that because that is reality. Yeah. But don't tell me then that that character is morally above anybody else. Like in the Vampire Diaries, Damon is the type of character that thinks like that. He's like, yep, good people die, bad people die, everyone's gonna die. I'm gonna be out for myself. But he owns that, and he's like, I'm not gonna tell you that I'm a hero or that you should root for me. I'm just doing what's best for me, and I expect everyone else in the world to do what's best for them. But you then have like this movie. Also, The Vampire Diaries is incorrect with several other characters, so I'm not praising it as like the pinnacle of writing. But this movie, at the end, they're like, yeah, you've killed bad people and good people. You've killed, but you can be good now, and it's okay. That's not owning the reality of what's gone on here.
Especially because Renfield never killed for the greater good.
And
he killed for a demonic vampire.
And they even said the sister, the FBI sister, was like, this is the most prolific serial killer we've ever seen. He's been killing for 80 years. It's like, okay, then maybe someone should put this guy in jail. He sounds kind of like a Bones type Gormagon character, a Hannibal Lecter type deal. We need to get this guy behind bars. No, let's just let him go.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous.
So don't give me a moral message when your movie has no credibility. I also hated the whole. So I've been to with anorexic treatment. I was hospitalized for anorexia and then put like against my, like I didn't want to go into treatment, but when you are dying, they force you to go into a hospitalization for anorexia where you have to intensive patient medical interventions so that your organs stop failing and that you stop dying until your body gets right. And then you go into intensive outpatient, and there's a lot of therapy involved. But you sit around in these circles and you say all of these platitudes, and it was so cringy to me how that was like the whole point of this movie when that stuff does not work. Like when you have real issues going on, if you really are dealing with a narcissist, you need to get away. You don't need to tell yourself that you're good enough and all of these things. Like you need to actually change your circumstances. Yeah. I hate the idea that therapy is just affirming how great of a person you are. No, when you need therapy, you need to change. You have to intervene in your thought process or intervene in your life circumstances.
Yeah, that's how that whole group was. At no point did that group, the leader of that group therapy session, say, you need to leave, you need to go. He just said, tell yourself you're worth this and stand up to your bully. Like, no.
Sometimes that ends up with you in danger. Sometimes that ends up with you being very, very hurt. So no, that's not a good idea.
Or killed. Yeah. They'll beat you to an inch of your life.
Yeah. So let's not do that.
Yeah, if you're going to have an undertone of a dependent relationship and try to do it in a comedic way of teaching people to like stand up to people, maybe you should teach them that, hey, sometimes standing up doesn't work. If it's really bad, like Renfield's situation, where he's going to die if he stands up, then you need to remove yourself from the situation completely.
And also, I don't really know if they hit even their own desired message, because if Renfield is the character that we're following, and then Renfield ends up killing Dracula, like not only killing, but ends up becoming the villain himself by brutally torturing this person and finding so much joy in it. Both him and the other good guy character are finding so much joy in chopping up Dracula into little pieces and doing all of these awful things to him. So they killed Dracula. Is then the movie saying solve your narcissist problem by killing your oppressor or your abuser? Because that's also not a good message. Like, you, just because someone's hurting you, it doesn't give you the right to hurt them unless it is in direct self-defense. So if they would have, killed him in the midst of the battle, yes, I understand. But are you sending that message to tell everybody in that support group now to kill whoever is, making you a codependent? Because that's also a you problem. This movie was absolute trash, and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, I think, admittedly, maybe we're looking at it a little bit too seriously, but this movie was so bad that
if the movie was funnier, I would be taking it as a joke, but the comedy didn't land. So you need to make a funny movie in order for me. I don't take The Hangover as like, oh, wow, they made some really bad decisions there. I really don't think that a guy could have survived in a trunk that long or whatever. Like, no, it's funny, so I just laugh. This movie wasn't good enough to make me laugh.
Yeah, no, I think it got me a smile or two, and I didn't laugh out loud or anything. This movie wasn't very good.
So we also just looked up, because Shelby said, wasn't Johnny Depp in a Dracula movie? And I said, what? No, he was never in a vampire movie, because he was Sweeney Todd in Sweeney Todd, and then he was Ichabod Crane in Sleepy Hollow. But no, he was in that Dark Shadows movie. And And he did a really great job, and the movie did a really great job. And that was a vampire comedy that had some, superhero type action elements, and it was very funny and enjoyable.
Yeah, and it is directed by Tim Burton, so you know that it had some dark undertones to it as well, and yet they still managed to land the comedy aspect of it and keep it somewhat believable within the vampire lore itself.
Yeah, I had absolutely no issues with Dark Shadows.
Yeah. If you want to watch a comedic vampire movie, watch, I think it's called, watch Dark Shadows, not Renfield.
And if you want to watch a better, comedy kind of meta play on vampires and even a familiar, if you want to watch a slave serve a vampire in a humorous way, go watch What We Do in the Shadows. It's on Hulu, and it's an office type style TV show, and they land the comedy.
Yes, that's very true, and it's exactly like that. It's basically The Office, but with vampires. So if you
and
like
it's basically
Office,
like what Renfield I thought was going to be.
Yeah, that's the whole reason we went to watch it, because we thought it was going to be this What We Do in the Shadows type Office style, but in a movie.
And we've only seen season 1, but the familiar, the slave in that to the master, he wants to become a vampire, and the master has promised him that ability, just like Dracula did to Renfield in the book, and that's what keeps the slave there. It actually is a way better version.
Yes, so watch those, not this.